Hello again and welcome back. So today we're going to be having a look at planning a school trip. So we're getting towards the end of the summer term now, and this is a time where lots of teachers like to take their class on school trips, mainly because the weather is almost guaranteed to be nice at this time of year, and it's just over the summer term, so some schools can only do trips at a certain time of year or can only do one trip a year, and that's the case. You want to plan it for the good time of year when the weather's going to be nice and the kids can get outside. Other teachers might be planning trips throughout the year, they might do one per term or something like that. But again, it's often this summer term, they'll try and do a trip later on in the term just to try and show that actually, yeah, we'll go outside somewhere, get outdoors and have a really nice school trip. So I'm looking forward to our school trip. Is in a couple of weeks' time and I cannot wait to go on it. And I've done all the planning, all the prep for it already. So I just thought I'd go through with you guys, if you're looking at planning your first school trip or thinking about what school trips involve, what types of things are used when you do a school trip as a teacher, and the points of view that you look at as a teacher, then we're just going to go through and together talk about the different things that you have to think of. First off, clearly, is you have to decide on where your school trip is going to be. So you've got to think about your topics. What topic are you teaching? And your school trip will almost certainly be linked into that topic. So if you're doing space, is there like the National Space Centre you can go to? If you're doing something about Romans, can you go to a local gallery or museum that's got some Roman artifacts, or a workshop? World War II, there's various projects across the country that they do different experiences of experiencing World War II and that kind of thing. There's all sorts to do with all sorts of different topics around the country, and hopefully some near you. So you've got to think of how you can link it into your topic, and of course make it engaging for the kids. The best trip I've gone on so far as a teacher is we went to the National Coal Mining Museum with my class when we were doing a local area study, because in our area in Yorkshire there's loads of coal mines and it was quite a big part of the area as the children's parents and grandparents were growing up. So we went out and looked there and it was just fantastic. You got to go in the coal mine, you got to pretend you were a coal miner and take part in some of that. You also got to learn and look at lots of old things that were used in the coal mines and clothes and what life was like and how the job was done. Absolutely brilliant. So I definitely recommend that. If you're in Yorkshire and are doing some kind of study to do with coal mining, then the National Coal Mining Museum is a must. It was brilliant fun and it was local. And that's another thing that often takes into effect. So you have to look at your school trips and your school policy on school trips and things like how feasible is it to go far away. Because as much as some things that are further away are amazing, obviously the further you go, the less time the children get at the exhibit, at the museum, at whatever it is you're going to. The more travel time, the more wasted time during that day. So definitely try and keep your trips as local as you can, because that means you get more time at the area. And look at things that are open, because the place we're going in a couple of weeks doesn't open till 10 o'clock, which sadly obviously the kids get to school at 9. There's going to be a bit of waiting around because it is quite nearby and it's a bit of wasted time, which is a shame, but hopefully it'll be worth it for us. So yeah, you've got to look at where you're going to want to go, link it into your topic and think about the distance travelled. Is the distance you're going and the time it's going to take to get there worth it? The furthest I've ever gone for a trip is I think about 1 hour, and it was worth it for the trip, but it was also, obviously it was 1 hour there, 1 hour back. The traffic was a bit dodgy on the way there, so we were a little bit late. And it took the shine off because it was a lot of travelling. The children get bored, sat on the coach. It makes a bit of life harder for you as a teacher, as well as the kids don't have quite as much fun. So definitely try and keep travel to a minimum, my recommendation, unless you've got somewhere that is totally worth going to, in which case maybe a little bit more travel is worth the risk. So the next thing you've got to do, and this will be something that your school will already have in place, you've just got to make sure you remember to do it. And I was bad at remembering to do these when I first started because I didn't know they were a thing. But you have to do a risk assessment. So obviously risk assessments happen all the time for any kind of activity that takes part in schools, and any school trips need a risk assessment as well. So this is looking at the dangers and the risks that are attached to going to wherever you're visiting. Schools generally will have a generic version of this that they will be able to give you, and you can go through and see what applies to you and then add on any other risks that entail because of that. So for example, if you're going to a beach, well, that risk assessment might not have risks about tides and that kind of thing, so you'll have to add those on. But generally, they're pretty much a cover-all, and as long as you've read through it and you understand it and you haven't got any extra needs from children in your class or anything like that that are needed to be accounted for, then you should be good to go. But it's something you do have to remember, and they normally have to be in by a certain date, so maybe 28 days or a month or something before you go on your trip. So just be aware of that, and if you're booking a trip, make sure you've left yourself enough time to fill in the risk assessment, because the last thing you want is to book a trip, tell the kids about it, and then not be able to do it because of some kind of paperwork or something like that. Obviously you'll be disappointed, the kids will be disappointed, and it just causes a bit of friction, and you want this trip to be smooth sailing and fun. So yeah, just be aware of the risk assessments, make sure you get them done, and then you'll have a good time. The next most important thing to think about who is going. So first of all, you'll need to look at your school's ratio, and obviously that's by ratio I mean the ratio of staff to children. So every school, and I'm not sure if this is a national guideline or whether one that schools set themselves, but has a certain ratio of the number of children that should be with an adult at a time. So obviously when you're taking a class of 30 kids, you might want to have groups of 6, and so therefore take 5 staff, groups, slightly bigger groups, and take 3 or 4 staff. And also looking at parents and which parents can go with you as well, because parent volunteers love to come along, and most of the time they're very helpful and will offer, advice if they've been to the area before. When I first went on my school trip, the parents that went with me were a massive help because I'd never been to the area we were going, and they were able to tell me stuff on the coach there and when we were walking around that I didn't know, and obviously could then relay that to the kids, and they got to learn a bit more. So parent helpers are always brilliant, but definitely think about the staff that are going with you. And when you are going on a trip, you obviously split them into groups. Each staff member will have a group of kids, and each parent will have a group of kids, and that's kind of their group for the day. So think about splitting them up and making sure that children are with children who they all work well with when they're on the trip, and adults that they all work well with when they're on the trip. Because it is true that just like adults do prefer working with some people over others, children will prefer working with some adults over other adults. And if you put a child with an adult on a trip that they're not going to enjoy working with, then they will not get the most out of that trip. Obviously, you've got to be within reason, and sometimes it's not feasible, and your school might have a different amount of staff that they want you to take compared to what you would like. And that does happen just because staffing and people are busy, people get pulled different places. So definitely have a think about it, but have a look at what you'd like to do, and early on talk to your head or whoever is in charge of this kind of decision at your school, and just find out who you can take with you. So you can start to plan and look at the groups and who is going to go with who. So once you've done all this planning and you've done all this thinking about the trip, the first thing you need to do to actually book the trip is to start talking to the venue, and start off by obviously phoning them or emailing them and saying, look, this is what I want to do this trip. Is it possible? So then obviously you need to start thinking about dates and the actual date you're going to go on your trip to this location, and getting it all set into stone. And again, if this is your first trip, I'd recommend talking to someone at your school and work out how that is normally done. But generally, you'll obviously find a date, you'll go and talk to your head teacher or a senior member of SLT and see if that date is available for you to go on the trip, and check which staff is available to go with you at that point. And once you've got it confirmed that, yeah, that's available and you can go on the trip, then obviously talk to the venue that you're going to and get it booked and confirmed as early as possible. Because the same thing with obviously wanting to tell parents early, you want to communicate well and early with the team at the venue, because they will be obviously more able to help you then, and any special requests you might have or anything like that, they'll be able to put it into place with even more warning. The later you leave something and the later you mess about a school trip, if you're taking 30 or 60 or 90 children, depending on how many classes are going on the trip, to a venue, then obviously the bigger and the larger the group and the shorter notice you give them, the less kind of flexibility they have to organise things for you. So definitely communicate early and communicate clearly, because there might be things that they are not ready for. But generally, these staff that are on the area of helping out school trips and organising that and coordinating staff, they're generally very, very good at what they do and very happy to accommodate any needs you have. So don't be afraid of asking for things if you do need them, because again, it'll just make your trip run smoother, and you'll have time then to make sure the kids are enjoying themselves on the day and not having to rush around and make sure things are set in place that you didn't mention beforehand. One of the final things you need to make sure you are doing with your trip is also communicating well with parents. So obviously normally parents will make a small financial contribution to the school, and this is often a subsidised cost of the trip. So the school will pay something towards it, but so will parents for each child. And clearly the earlier you communicate this with your parents, the easier it is for them to set it up and work out how much it's going to be for them and when they can pay it and that kind of thing. And it's polite to do it as early as possible. Again, this is something I learned from experience, because there was one trip in my first NQT, I think it was the first trip I went on, where I actually forgot to tell the parents we were going on the trip until maybe a week or two before we actually were due to go. And this was purely a fault on my part. And since then, obviously, I've learned to communicate a lot earlier. I agree with my parents much more in this time. But it didn't help, and it caused a few issues that week, and making sure everything was sorted and ready for that day. So definitely make sure that you can communicate with parents early and they are prepared for the trip. This is also in terms of, you might need to get to school slightly early on that day. You might be getting back to school later than normal on the day, and they need time to repair the various childcare or that kind of thing. If their shift patterns can't change where they work, or they can't pick up the children at that time or drop them off for whatever reason. So as always, it's just polite, it's manners, and it helps everything run more smoothly if you communicate early on and tell them, look, this is what we're going to do, time, date, time drop off, time of pick up, and what's going to be included on the trip when the children are there. And that pretty much is the basics of a school trip. So they are absolutely brilliant to go on, and they often are really hard work. They're hard work organising on top of all your normal duties in school, and they are often busy days on the day, because you're the sole person in charge of 30 different children and adults when you're outside, and making sure everyone stays safe, everyone's happy, everyone's enjoying themselves, and getting some good educational benefits out of the trip. So they are a really busy time, but they're also something that children do cherish. And if ever there's a time where for some reason they can't go on a trip, for instance, over the last year, school trips haven't happened, and the children have missed out on a lot, and they have been missing these trips and asking when they can go on them again. So the fact that this summer trips are now allowed and we can do them is fantastic. And I cannot wait to go on the school trip myself, and hopefully next year will be a normal year and we can get through all the trips that we normally would have done throughout year 5. So thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope this has been helpful as a quick guide on what to do in the event of a school trip. And as always, I'll be aiming to get videos out on a Tuesday and a Friday at 5 p.m. So thank you very much for watching. If you've got any questions about school trips or anything you're not quite sure of that I've not mentioned, then please just leave a comment down below and I'll get back as quickly as I can. So thank you very much.